Hello, thank you for taking your time to watch this webinar today. My name is Kristen Gans and I work on the training and support team here at HOPS. Today I have my colleague Daniel Brewer with me. He's one of our math content specialists, and we plan to cover the Question Builder tool today and demonstrate how to build a math content question. So I don't plan to give an overview of how to use the Question Builder tool, as that was covered in a previous webinar that's hosted on our blog currently. However, if you would like a training, please never hesitate to reach out to us. We'd be happy to meet with you for that. So without further ado, I'll let Daniel take it away.
Thank you so much, Kristen. I'll go ahead and get started with creating a question in Question Builder. And so the first thing that you want to do when creating a question is to basically kind of design it, plan it out on paper, get something ready before you actually go into Question Builder. So let's do that now. Suppose I want to make a question where you're given the graph of a rational function and you want to ask the student to determine a function for that. So determine a function g of x for the following graph. So we've got our rational graph here, and then what we want the correct answer to be. And we want our question to be dynamic, not just a static question. So rather than just one iteration where we have 1 over x plus 3 plus 4, we want to maybe have one where we have dynamic variables. So 1 over x plus a plus b might be a good idea. So we want to come up with some variables a and b that might be good for this situation. In order for the graph to look good, we probably want them to not be the same as each other, because then that's, in order for the graph to look good, we want them to be between 1 and 7. Otherwise, the graph will get too close to the edge. And then we want a and b not to be equal, just so that we're actually appropriately testing, the horizontal shift versus the vertical shift. So, and then one quick note when we're using the graph builder functionality inside Question Builder is that when you draw the graph of a rational function, you want it to be in the form p of x over q of x, where you have a polynomial over a polynomial. So if you take the function 1 over x plus a plus b and then simplify it, add it together, you end up with 1 plus ba plus bx. So we're going to need 3 variables, an a, a b, and then a c, which is 1 plus ba. So with all of that in mind, I can go over to Excel to come up with some good iterations here. So I've got A and B in my Excel table. And A, as you see, it goes from 1 to 7, and then I've chosen B values from 1 to 7, but such that B does not equal A. So I ended up with about 42 iterations there, which is good. We generally want to get about 30 or more, 30 to 50, and 50 is the max that we can use in Question Builder. So in order to get the third iteration, I'll just use a little tool in Excel, but basically we're going to do 1 plus a times b. And drag it down. And now I have some good values that I can use when creating my question in Question Builder. And that'll give us 42 different iterations. So it'll be one question, 42 iterations. It's going to be a good question. So first step in actually creating the question is that we need to go into the gradebook. So I've already logged myself into Kristen's gradebook here. Question Builder is under Assignments. Click on Question Builder. And then once it loads, we're going to want to create a new folder, or we can use an existing folder. I'll go ahead and create a folder called, we'll call it Graph. And then once you're in the folder, you click the Create button to create a question. And now we get started. So first of all, we want to create a question header and a question statement. Question header is optional. You do not need that. It's generally for things like when you want to have more than one step in a question. The question header would be the thing that's kind of common to all of the steps, and then the question statement is going to be what happens in that particular question. So for this one, I want the question header to be the part where we say determine a function g of x for the following graph. So let's just go ahead and I'm going to copy that and paste it in. It's not going to paste exactly. Because I need to now put in the math portion here. So I want to determine a function g of x. In order to type math, anything where you have a variable or some sort of mathematics expression, you want to insert that using expression builder. So expression builder is this button right here. So I click expression builder, and I want to type g of x. This button right here is for inserting parentheses. We want to use the left and right parentheses. And I guess taking a step back, once you're in question builder, you're going to type in all of your math using LaTeX or LaTeX or LaTeX, depending upon how you pronounce it. And there we have some documentation right here that you can click on and determine if you're not sure how to type something in LaTeX, you can figure that out using the LaTeX documentation. But we have a lot of handy buttons here for most of the things that you're going to be using. So there's g of x, and you can see a little preview here, so that looks right. So we have determine a function g of x for the following graph. Click OK. Notice you're now going to see that that says expression 0 in the view. The idea is that it is every expression that you build gets its own expression number behind the scenes, and so the variables and the expressions are going to look like that until you actually go and preview the question. So then the question statement is going to be determine a function g of x for the following graph. All right, so just forgetting that basically we're going to want the question header to say something more generic, like consider the following graph of the function g of x. And then once we have the graph there, we're going to say the question statement will actually determine a function f of x for the given graph. So I'm going to wait to do the graph because that's going to take a little bit longer, and it's a good idea to save as often as possible in Question Builder, just in case you get any sort of internet connectivity issues or anything like that. It's a good idea to save often. So try to do a little bit and then save, and then a little bit more and then save again. So we have our question statement, and I want to go ahead and write in the answer for the question. So I'm going to choose free response because I do not want this to be a multiple choice question. I want it to be something where the student actually plugs the answer in, and they're going to be plugging in math as opposed to just text. So I want this to be math. The text box size, you can generally, if it's auto, it's going to determine it pretty well, but we probably only need a small one here. And we want to evaluate it as expression. And we do have some documentation here about what the different types of evaluation do and how they work. But for our purposes, what the student's going to be entering is an expression. So we want to evaluate as an expression. All right. And then for a prefix here, I think it'll be nice to tell the student, go ahead and give the student the g of x. So that they do not have to type that into the expression. So the prefix to the function will be g of x equals. We will leave the suffix blank. And in this case, we want the answer to be 1 over x plus a plus b. So the first thing that I want to do is go ahead and just get the fractional expression in there. So it's 1 over x plus a plus b. And I'm going to go ahead and save that right now. And when you save a question the first time, it asks you for the question details. You have to name your question. Anything that makes sense to you or where you're going to be able to remember it later. And then you need to choose a difficulty level, and this is dependent upon where you're going to be assigning the question and just kind of the level of difficulty with respect to all the other questions there. So I'm going to go with medium difficulty here. And now I've saved my graph, or I've saved my question. It's not super useful at the moment because it does not have a graph and it does not have any variables. So, but we're going to keep on, go ahead and create those now. So let's start with the variable table. So I want this 3 here to actually be the variable A as I defined in my Excel sheet. So I'm going to click on this button, this X button here, and that is our variable manager. So when you create a variable for your question, you have to give it a name. I suggest doing something small, easy, like the word variable, but shorter. Var is easy to remember. And then notice that it has 3 columns. You can add columns to the end or remove columns depending upon how many variables that you have. You can add rows and remove rows. But ultimately, I already created my variables over here, and they are already A, B, and C. So I'm going to copy these and just paste them right in. So we're going to paste. And you can kind of scroll up and down and see that it is all the same variables that we had before, 1 through 42. Now, if you click Save here, what that does is it actually saves the variable table. It doesn't save the question. And I want to insert variable A where the 3 was. So I'm going to insert column A, insert. And then when I come back to the question, I can see that I have X plus var A. So var is the name of the variable, and A is the column that we're talking about here, which is the variable A. And then for the 4, we want that to be a B. So I'm just going to click the variable button again, and now I'm going to choose B in the column drop down. So it's the var variable. You can do multiple variables within one question, but it's generally going to be better just to try and get all of the variables into, or all of the columns into one variable so that they're all interacting with each other in a nice way and that they make sense compared with each other and that they all iterations. Each row of the variable table is a separate iteration, so those are always going to interact with each other. Anytime this A is 1, this B is 2, and this C is 3. So, all right, so I'm inserting variable B. So I now have my answer is 1 over X plus A plus B. So that's what we want our answer to be. So that's good. Just go ahead and save while I'm here. And now we want to get our graph in there so that we actually have something that that the student can see and find the answer. All right, so when you do a graph, you probably want to center that. And that's just kind of standard best practice for where to put the where to put the graph. And so now I want to open up my graph builder. Graph builder is this button here that looks like a graph with a curve on it. Okay, so I'm starting to create my graph, and I have this nice blank. This is what my graph looks like so far. It's just a blank -10 to 10 grid. You can update that by clicking the settings here. You can give it things like title, a summary. You can change the intervals between the grids. You can change whether X goes from -10 to 10. Say I don't want it to go by 5, I can change it so that it goes by 2. And you can see how that changed the graph over here. And then similarly, I would probably want to do that for the Y values as well. So now it's going from -10 to 10 by 2s instead of by 5. So you can make all of that stuff happen over on the settings. So now to actually get the curve on there, I'm going to go to, in Graph Builder, we call it a shape. So I'm going to add shape. And I want this to be a rational function. So I'm going to choose the rational shape here. And then what happens with rational shape is that you need to choose a polynomial for the numerator and a polynomial for the denominator. And the way that we've programmed this is that what you want to do is enter the coefficients in sort of reverse order. So if the polynomial is 3x, the constant term is 0 and the x term is 3. So you would enter 0, 3. And if you want x plus 5, you would actually do 5 plus x. So in ours, going back to my design here, my variable was c plus bx. The numerator of my function is c plus bx. So I want the first variable, or excuse me, the first coefficient to be the variable c. So within Graph Builder, you can also access variables. So I have my variable manager up here. So I'm going to click variable, and I'm going to choose column C and insert. And then the second variable, or excuse me, the second coefficient would be the variable b, because it was c plus bx. And it gives you a preview there of what the numerator would be. So the numerator is c plus bx. That's what I want. That's good. The denominator was a plus x. So that means that the first coefficient is a and the second coefficient is 1. So I'm going to plug those in. Variable a. Nope, not source. Variable a. Insert. And then comma. And then 1. So that is the function a plus x. And now we just choose some of our options to get the graph to show up. So I want to show the graph. I do not want to show the equation or the label because that's the whole point of the question, is for the student to figure out the equation. So we don't want to give that to them. And then I want it to be a solid graph. Primary blue is a good color. Extend is whether the arrows. So you want the arrows to extend to both sides. So I'm going to click both on that. Correctness is not relevant for this. That has to do with basically when you get into Tutor, you can make a graph that has a correct or an incorrect state, so that you can say, like, it will be green if it's correct and it'll be red if it's incorrect. But that's for Tutor mode. So we're on the main screen, so we want it to just be regular primary blue. And then interactivity, we do not want our students dragging the graph in this particular case. That functionality is available, but it doesn't help for our particular question here. So I'm going to go ahead and save this. And now I have my rational graph. And you can actually scroll through the variables, kind of see how the graph is changing as you go from row to row in the variable table. And now if I click OK, we can now see the graph there. And again, until we preview it, it's just going to say graph 0, but let's go ahead and save, and I can actually do a quick preview just to show you that that's there. And there, that's what it looks like. So good times. It looks like we're on a good track. We've got consider the following graph. We're asking the student to determine the function for the graph. We have an answer, the correct answer. And basically at this point, you could take this question and assign it to practice or certify or WebTests, or use it on WebTests to make a printed test. The question is fully functional, but it doesn't have a lot of the bells and whistles we need, like the tutor options and things. So let's hop in and create some of those. All right, so first of all, and this is just my preference, you don't have to have asymptotes drawn. I like to have asymptotes drawn, so I'm just going to go ahead and do that so that the student can get a clearer picture of what the asymptotes actually look like for this graph. So an asymptote is a line, so I'm going to go ahead and add the shape of a line. And there's even an option here for asymptotes. I'm going ahead and add an asymptote. The vertical asymptote would be at the line, well, that would be where the denominator is 0, so that would be at the line x equals -a. So I'm going to make the x coordinate be negative, and then we have the variable table up here, so var a. there's negative a, and we want to show the line. We don't want the equation of the line. We want it to be dashed because it's an asymptote. Maybe we'll give it a different color, like a secondary blue instead of a primary blue. And maybe we won't extend it because the arrows on the line might kind of run into the arrows on the graph, so it might be better just to have the asymptote be without arrows. So let's just go ahead and add another one for the vertical. Excuse me, the horizontal. The horizontal asymptote is going to be at the vertical shift of b, so it will be the equation y equals b. So I'm going to go ahead and insert b. And again, we want it to be dashed and secondary blue and not extended with the arrows. And then we click save. And then we have our nice, beautiful graph. And again, you can go through the rows. You can even choose specific rows to see what it'll look like. And that's what our graph looks like. Okay, so maybe now is when the question is ready for you to be able to use on tests and quizzes and practice and certify and all of that fun stuff. Okay. So now what we would like to do is maybe go ahead and add in some tutor. So to add tutor options, we click over here where it says add tutor options. I'm going to start by adding a solution. This is helpful because when a student takes a test, if they get an answer wrong, they can always go and do the solution afterwards. Solution header, what we want to do with the solution header is we want to take essentially the original statement and sort of reword it so that it's briefer and just inform that's ready for a solution. So something like, you were asked to determine a function g of x for the given graph. So I'm going to actually just copy this from up here. Because I want to use the same graph. And if you look behind the scenes in source control, you will see that this is actually expression 0 and this is graph 0. So it is exactly the same graph. If you copy and paste an expression, it will be the same exact expression, which means if I change it here, it's going to be changed up here as well. So you do want to make sure that if you're copying and pasting expressions, that you do intend for it to be the exact same expression every time. So you were asked to determine a function g of x for the given graph. So that's our solution header. And now we need to go down and enter our solution. I'm just going to save real quick. Oh, but I need to actually have something here. So here's where you get clever and write your solution in any way possible. So the given graph has the same shape as the basic function f of x equals 1 over x, but it's been shifted a units left and b units upward. So I need to change all of that so that it actually reads correctly in question builder. But first I just want to go ahead and give it a save. All right, so f of x equals 1 over x. We actually want this to be an expression, so I'm going to enter that in expression builder. There's f of x equals 1 over x. And we don't actually want it to say the word a. We want that to be the variable a. So I could insert the variable right here, but when you're dealing with numbers and math expressions, you do always want them to be in an expression builder. So I'm going to insert expression builder, and then I'm going to click the variable a. And then similarly for b, I want that to be an expression. Take the variable b. and then give some clue based on the theorems about horizontal and vertical shifting. The function for this graph is blank. Okay. So I see what happened here. I chose when I copied and pasted, you generally want to copy and paste with text so that it doesn't try to copy the formatting from wherever you're copying and pasting. All right. So I want an expression that has the correct answer that we had defined earlier. So I'm going to hop up to the correct answer, copy that. And insert an expression here. So the correct answer is g of x equals 1 over x plus a plus b. And then just adding a period for grammar purposes. And so we now have a solution. And I think I just saved y out of the word. But if you preview, we can see that this will change dynamically based on the graph. So it shifted 1 unit to left, 5 units upwards, and then it's 1 over x plus a plus 5. All right, so we now have a solution. That's fantastic. The other tutor options that we have are hint, general explain error, and step-by-step. When the student gets a question incorrect, if we don't have an explain error there, then it's just going to tell them what the correct answer is, or tell them they made an error and to try again. But we want to give them a little bit more specific explain error feedback there. So I'm going to add a general explain error. And I want to use the same header that I used in the solution. So I'm just going to come up here and copy this. And then drop it back in here. And then enter my explain error. So I have some of these here. Wondering if I can copy paste this time and it'll work out. So just some common errors that the students might make to give them a clue as to what might have happened. Just going to try this again. All right. So these are some errors that the student might make when trying to determine the graph here, or to determine the function based on this given graph. So what we might actually also want to do is create a couple of specific explain errors based on this feedback here. So to create a specific explain error, what we're actually going to do is in the step text, go ahead and define an incorrect answer that we think the student is likely to make, and then give them some specific feedback based on that. So notice when you create a new answer, it automatically loads the prefix, so you don't have to do that again. And then we want this one to have 0 credit because it's going to be an incorrect answer. So let's say one possible mistake that they might make is they write x minus a instead of x plus a. Fairly common mistake there. So we want to make sure we address that. So 1 over x minus a plus b, and then what you can do is give them a specific explain error here. So for example, it appears you may have made an error when determining the direction of the horizontal shift. So that way the student knows that there's something about the horizontal part that they might have made an error in. So in the step-by-step, I want to go ahead and copy and paste my header, the same header that I was using in the solution and the explain error. And then we'll hop over to the step-by-step statement. And this is all just kind of depends on what you think will be helpful to the student. So for this particular graph, it might be helpful to ask them, what is the basic function f of x that has the same shape as the given graph. All right, and so then a lot of the same options that we had for when you were in the step answer box, we can make this a free response, math, small text box, evaluate as expression, and we want to again do the, well, in this case, we're going to do f of x equals because we're wanting a basic function rather than the function that we're looking for, which is g of x, because this is the first step in figuring out what's going on here. So f of x equals, and then the answer here would be 1 over x. So I'm going to insert a fraction. And then go ahead and save that. So the student has one step now. And then if I go and add a second step, what you'll notice is that the header here is actually the same as it was in step-by-step 1. So the step-by-step header stays for each one. But we want to now figure out what we just determined, that the graph has the same shape as the basic function, f of x equals 1 over x. And that's what we determined in the last step, so that's just a quick reminder there. But it has been shifted horizontally and vertically. So we might want to ask the student is how many units has the graph been shifted horizontally, and in which direction? And just to be clear, we'll say the graph of f of x equals 1 over x. What's the horizontal shift? So how many units has been shifted horizontally, and was it a left shift or a right shift? And so for this one, there's really only a couple options here, so we might actually go with multiple choice on this one. Checkboxes and radio buttons. Checkboxes are used when you want, when you can have multiple correct answers. Radio buttons is if you're choosing one specific answer. One answer per line, and we don't want the answer order locked because we want it to be different for every student, depending upon the iteration. So let's go ahead and define the correct answer. The correct answer would be A units to the left. So I need the variable A and an expression. I'm going to click variable A, units to the left. So an incorrect answer would be if you said A units to the right. So let's create that as an incorrect answer. And then another incorrect answer that someone might have is multiple choice option here would be if they said B units to the left or B units to the right. So let's go with B units to the left. Correct answer is A units. So we're going to go with B units as a distractor here. And then B units to the right. So really just 4 options here. And we now have 2 steps. Step 3, we can go similarly. How many units has the graph of f of x equals 1 over x been shifted vertically, and in which direction? I'm going to hop to step 2 and copy my f of x equals 1 over x here, since I just want to keep using that same expression. Vertically, and in which direction? Okay, and then the correct answer here is going to be B units upward. So I'm just going to copy in this variable B. Change answer 1 to be a correct answer. And the correct answer would be B units upward, which means that the incorrect answer would be B units downward. And then similarly, we can take one of these, say A units upward and A units downward. Those might be good alternate incorrect answers. All right, so that's step 3. So step 1, they determine the basic shape. Step 2, they determine the horizontal shift. Step 3, they determine the vertical shift. Step 4, we bring it on home and say, use this information to determine a function g of x for the graph. I'm actually going to copy this directly from the solution. And edit a little bit. Don't want to write the same thing over again. something. Quite, I don't think I copied that right here. It's not copying right, okay. Okay, the given graph has the same shape as the basic function f of x equals 1 over x, but it's been shifted a units to the left and b units upwards. So let's just ask the student to go ahead and use the theorems about horizontal and vertical shifting to determine a function for g of x. All right, and then we want this to basically match the step 1 in terms of having the same prefix, same size. It's basically the same question that we were asking on the main question, but we now have used 4 steps to get them to that point. So guided the student step by step along the way. So we want this to be g of x equals, and then the correct answer is the same correct answer as step 1. So go ahead and copy paste it. And then save. And we now have a question that is ready to be assigned to your students about determining a rational function given a graph. And so just in case you want to know how to now actually assign that question, if you go into your curriculum, open up any lesson that you think might be a good one for this, to assign this question. And I'm choosing lesson on transformations of functions, and that's basically what's happening here. Transformations of functions has lots of questions in it, so it just takes a moment to load all of the math into there. But what's going to default here is the default list of questions that go along with transformations of functions, but then we're going to click under the chapter here, and there's a spot for instructor created questions. And then remember that the name of my folder was graphs. So I'm going to click the graphs folder. All right, so we have instructor created for the chapter and then graphs for the folder. And you can see we have the rational function given graph. That's the name of the question that we just created. So you can add this to the curriculum by clicking the add button. And now that shows up at the very end. And similarly, you can add it to a web test. By clicking on assignments, web tests, create new, or you can open an existing. And then there's going to be, under the question bank, the Hawks default question bank, you can select instructor and the folder graphs, and then add it here or select it and add the selected question to your test. So, well, I hope that this has been helpful. I'm going to go ahead and knock it back to Kristen, and thank you so much for watching this.
Thank you so much, Daniel. It is incredibly helpful to be able to see how we build questions from beginning to end and all of the tips and best practices that you have throughout. So thank you for going through that with us. As I mentioned at the beginning, if you would like any training on the Question Builder tool, don't hesitate to reach out to us. We'd be happy to help you with that. And if you're familiar with the tool and you just have a question about how to go about building the type of question that you'd like to create, don't hesitate to reach out about that as well. We're happy to help. Thank you again for your time.